Hey guys, time for 3 questions with Pastor Carney. I'm Phil Kuhn with Pastor Carney. Behind the equipment, Billy Brinkerhuff. Welcome.
And this week, we're going to have a question from a congregation member. However, I do not know who that congregation member is because it came in anonymously through Pastor.
I like it.
We all have questions, and Pastor Carney has answers. We all want to know what he thinks. There's important information to know. What are his thoughts? How did he get here? What's his favorite golf ball? It's time for 3 questions with Pastor Carney.
When people don't walk out of the church during a sermon? No, seriously. That's a good question. How do I know? You know, that's a tough question. It's an easy answer, but a tough answer. There are many times I don't know, and I just leave it in God's hands. But the easy part of that answer is when I let, this might sound weird, when I let God talk through me, let the Spirit work in me before I say or do something, then I can pretty much rest assured that it's okay because it's His. One of the things I pray, if you see me, I'm always praying at the altar before I preach. I have a special prayer that I use. But I also kind of, in a way, say to God in my prayer, God, let your Spirit talk through me and don't let me get in your way. Mm-hmm. And so when I let God take over, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be okay. When I put myself into it, then there are things that come out of my mouth that sometimes shouldn't come out of my mouth. And some of those are good and some of those are not so good. So I would kind of go with that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. For me, it's one of those things where it's only a gut thing for me, which is the Holy Spirit essentially. But I like to write things out. So if I'm thinking about a name for something, I used to write commercials for radio. And so I would sit there and I would write it all out. Right now I'm working on a name for the nonprofit I'm starting. So I sit down and write it all out. And then also I like to put good people around myself to bounce ideas off of, to say, does this make sense? Why would this make sense? Why would this not make sense? And then actually listen to what they say.
Right. Yeah, the genesis of this question was through the men's Bible study, going through the adventures of David. And things started to fall apart on him when he stopped seeking God's advice first. You know, when at the beginning, he's constantly going to God and going to pray and say, hey, how do you want me to handle this situation? What do you want me to do? And then when he stops doing that is when things start going awry. And I can equate that to myself, and where I'm constantly in the situation where I think, hey, this is going to go great. I've got everything set up and I'm doing, this change is going to work out fantastically. And God says, yeah, no, it's not. And it goes completely awry. And then I'm going, so I've, turning back to like David did and saying, hey, God, is this a good idea? Should I be doing this? And listening to that spirit moment, like you said.
Isn't it interesting, though, how sometimes, though, we fade slowly away and we haven't realized how far we've come until something happens and God smacks us, or something happens in our life and we go, whoa, like I didn't feel myself drifting. I've done that many times in my life where there's just a slow drift.
There are times when, on a rare occasion, I feel good about a sermon that I've preached. And on the way home in the car, Donna would lovingly say, well, dear, you might want to delete that one from your files. I'm going, thought that was a pretty good one. And then there are times when I'm preaching, and in my head I'm thinking, Carney, just be quiet, say amen, and sit down. And then I do that, and then after worship, people are going, fantastic sermon. I'm going, okay, that's because God takes over, and I'm out of the way and let God do the talking, and that's kind of how I know.
Kind of joking, but take joking aside, your sermons is my favorite thing about your pastoring. So for me, it's clear that the Spirit's speaking through your sermons because I love your sermons more than anything else that you do. So.
I had a moment about a week or so ago when we were in Nashville, Tennessee. We took the Studio Beat tour, and we went to the studio where Elvis Presley did a lot of his recording. and I got to stand on the X. The X in the room is where the best acoustics is, and I got to stand on the X, and Don has a picture of that. And then I sat down at the piano that he recorded a lot of songs on. The piano's still there. And the tour guy said, "Do you want to play a few bars?" And I went, "Seriously?" And actually, for a few bars, I actually played the piano that Elvis Presley had played.
That's cool.
And it was awesome. And then when I was in Germany, I actually got to stand in Luther's pulpit. And I know they weren't there, but to stand in Luther's pulpit and to realize I'm standing in where Luther preached, or I'm playing the piano that Elvis Presley played, it was just mind-boggling. But to be in the presence of the Word would be even far better than playing Elvis's piano or standing in Luther's pulpit. It's just I can say wow, which means without words, just wow. Just wow. Awesome. Yeah.
I would just hope that I'd be wise enough to actually listen.
Yeah.
Because if he came now today and he was here and I knew, oh, this was Jesus, then of course I'd be like this, like soaking it in. But I'm also curious if back then, if I would have been one of those people that would have gone, yeah, he's crazy or he's whatever. And if I would have heard what he said and really took it in, or if I would have blown him off, I'd like to think I would take it in. But
that's a good question, Phil. If I can piggyback Billy's question, is what would we have been like back then? See, now we know who he is, okay? We got the end of the story, okay? We got Revelation, we got Amen, we get that.
Yep.
But what if we were there?
Yep.
Would we have acted the same way we do now? I mean, I hope I would have.
You hope.
Yeah, but would we have listened to him intently like we would now, or we would say, who's this guy preaching up there?
Yeah, that's why in the last 3 questions I said I don't see myself as an inner circle person.
Yeah.
I see myself on the outside kind of going, this is really interesting stuff, but would I actually have dove in and followed?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I took that from you. I like that.
Yeah, I hope I would have acted the same way as I would now.
Yeah.
But
this question came out of The Chosen. There is the last 2 lines in Matthew 7 at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. The last 2 lines of that chapter say, "And all of them there stood in amazement of what they heard." And in the scene, when he finishes or as he's giving the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew is jotting down some notes, and he has already written down the entire sermon because Jesus took him aside and went through the whole sermon with him, and he wrote down everything, which I think is an interesting take that Dallas had on why Matthew is the one that has the entire Sermon on the Mount. It takes up 3 chapters, and he's reading through it, and one of the other characters comes over and says to him, "How's he doing?" And he says, it's word for word, but it's not. And this tear comes to his eye, and she says to him, "Yeah, he's speaking it." And I just, the way those 2 characters interacted in that little conversation while the sermon was going on was, there were Pharisees that were there. There were Roman guards. There were, just every member of society there at that time watching that sermon. And Matthew records it as all of them were amazed. And I can't imagine how powerful it would have been to hear Old Testament and, what we call now the New Testament things that Jesus was saying, how powerful that would have been.
Well, there's an episode in season 1 where one of the rabbis goes to John the Baptist in jail, and he's kind of secretly trying to get John the Baptist to tell him who Jesus is, and like he's curious. He wants to know how powerful he is and what he's doing. So again, going back to the question, maybe he was so powerful, maybe he was so stop you in your tracks that there'd be no denying him unless you didn't want to know him. Who knows?
Or you were so captured by another influencer that, he was going to use you to work against Jesus. So
Great question.
Have you ever had that happen to you in a church that you were a pastor at? That you became familiar and it became your home and...
No, and here's why. Growing up, I was born in New York City, Jamaica, Queens, and then when I was 4 or 5 years old, we moved out to Long Island to a town called Central Islip. And as you probably know by now, I grew up LCA, which is now part of the ELCA. And so we went to a church in a different town, but there actually is a LCMS church in the town of Central Islip where I grew up. But I was never associated with that church. And then when I went back to Long Island, my second call as the assistant pastor at St. Paul's in Amityville, I became also the vacancy pastor of that church in Central Islip. And it wasn't really a problem because I didn't grow up there. And so they knew of me, but they didn't know me. And so it really wasn't a conflict of interest. It wasn't a problem because I wasn't, little Billy growing up. I was Pastor Bill Carney, serving that congregation as a vacancy pastor. So it's kind of interesting that I served the vacancy-wise, served the church in my hometown, but it was not one I grew up in.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, the second part of that question was, is there a congregation that you have served, that you have left, that you would be willing to go back to and serve again?
Well, that's a tough question.
And I see now, when I first heard it, I did not see the correlation. But now that you've left, if you went back, would that verse apply? A prophet is not respected in his home.
I definitely, for different reasons, I definitely would not go back to the church in South Dakota, just because they're a farming community and I'm not much of a farmer, so that wouldn't work. I wouldn't go to South Dakota. Amityville, great people, great church, but I probably, 99% sure would not go back because I've been out of New York or Long Island so long that I'm not a Long Islander anymore, so I wouldn't be comfortable there. And the other churches, probably not. The one that would really get me thinking is the church is in Hawaii.
We know that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I don't know. I think it would be tough because they would see me as I was then. And hopefully I've matured and got more wisdom and knowledge in those, what's been 6, 7 years in between. But I think they would still see me as I was then and not as I am now. And I've made some changes, hopefully for the better. But I think they would still see me as PC, as it was back then. But to be a pastor of that church, probably not, because they would see me as I was 7 years ago.
Right.
But that'd probably be the only congregation where I would say, But
Hope they're not listening.
yeah, but they are. But they would see me as I was back then, and it would be tough. Yeah, it would be tough. That's a good question. That's a good thought-provoking question. But I am 100% happy right where I am. I mean, this place is awesome.
Same question, only not in
Yeah, because I don't really
pastoral
understand
sense.
it, to be honest with you. Explain it to me better.
Which?
The prophet.
Jesus
went back to his
returns to
hometown.
Nazareth.
Okay.
And he does a reading
Right.
Yeah.
in the church, and then he does some explanation of who he is, that he is the Messiah. He's the fulfillment of Isaiah, and they run him out of town.
They're like, "Who are you?"
No, you're the carpenter's
That's
son.
right. Who are you?
And he gives that line of a prophet is not without respect, except in his hometown and within his family.
They see him as the little Jesus and making wooden tools in the back shop, and they're going,
I can understand that. Yep.
So now the question to you that I would have, obviously not as a pastor, but as a father and a leader of your home, do you ever find it that your familiarity is kind of given a little bit more of a disrespect to some of the things that you might say or some of the advice that you give?
I don't see it as much through like being a father. What I do see is being a brother and a cousin. And this isn't an insult to my siblings or my cousins, but I grew up the goofball. I grew up the class clown. I grew up as kind of the dumb one who maybe got some A's and B's and a few C's here and there and stuff like that, while all my other siblings were getting straight A's and stuff like that, and 4.0 GPA, and I was kind of just middle of the road. I didn't go to college. So a lot of my adult life has been me kind of showing that I'm not just a screw up, I'm not just a goofball. I have that personality in me. I'm a people person. I like to have fun, but that there's substance behind me, and it's not just goofing around. So when I do get in a situation where I'm around cousins, I'm around all my siblings, sometimes I revert back to that Phil of being just the goofball because that's as they know me. So it's been hard for me in some ways to be a professional or to seem like I'm an adult, even at 33, because it's taken me probably the last 10 years, like of consistently trying to prove myself when I really don't need to, but trying to prove to my cousins and my siblings, like, I'm not just that kid you grew up with. I'm a man, and I have ambition, and I want to be a godly man and have children and a wife and all these things. And so I think they're starting to see that more, but it's taken time.
Well,
What about in a family gathering? If somebody asked you a question regarding realty, mortgages, houses, whatever else, and you have a lot of expertise in this field, and you're giving your expertise, the family members say, "Come on, Phil, you're the kid playing softball, losing, you cool, da 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 da."
No.
Okay.
No, that's been something I think I've had to really prove to them, though, because I've in my life, especially when it comes to careers, I've been a little flaky, and I've been a little trying to find my niche, and I like this, and I want to do this. This is the first time with real estate I've ever done something where I've consistently done it for many years now, and where it's been something where family members have seen me passionate about it, but then also having a certain level of expertise to give them. So I've helped certain family members in my career now, but starting out, I think I had to prove it.
Okay.
I don't know that in the first few years people really bought into it until they started seeing me sell homes and doing things, and it was like, all right, he likes this, he knows what he's doing, I think I'll listen to him.
Don't buy a home from Cousin Phil.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So I think I had to prove myself.
This is a good question for your brother.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because you may not know this, but Kyle is a teacher. And I wonder, when he stepped into the classroom as a teacher, were there teachers there who had him as a student and looked at him as if he was still a student and not a teacher?
Not only teachers, students too, because his younger brother was a student there when he started teaching.
That's right, Tyler,
Yeah.
So I wonder, this is a good Kyle question,
Yeah, I mean, I think that for anybody, it is hard to, if you grow up in a town and people know you as something or they see you as something, I still get it all the time. And I think that people don't do it intentionally. Like, for instance, somebody who is my parents' age, they don't look at me and see a grown man, and even people in church sometimes, you're a baby. And it's like, no, I'm a grown man. I have a wife. I have 3 kids. I have a mortgage. I have all these things. So I think that, again, over time, as we get older, and I have to do the same thing now for next generation coming up, it's hard to recognize, because I think we have to look at ourselves and go, oh my gosh, that means I'm this age, or oh my gosh, that means I'm going through this point in my life. But they don't know any different. And I can't turn around to somebody who's 18 now and be like, you're not an adult, you're just a kid. No, they're technically an adult. Even if we don't want to think they're an adult, they are. And it comes with maturity and things. But yeah, I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to prove that I'm an adult rather than just knowing that I am who I am through God. So
now, I fell into this exactly with my kids. With dog training. When both of them got a dog for 4-H, having them listen to me as an expert was really difficult for them. It is also for my wife too. The advice that I give on how to handle a dog or do what to do with a dog. I have vets that used to have vets that send clients to my school to fix their dogs. I had lots of people seeking my advice, and for some reason my family just would not take that advice. And one great story about this is my son Jonah, hopefully won't ever see this, but
if not, we love you, Jonah.
He had a dog that was a problem dog. He had behavior issues, and I was giving him lots of advice on how to work through these issues, and he just did not seem to want to take the advice that he would do kind of the opposite or not really listen. And finally, we just decided, okay, we're going to go up to this place up in Elkhart that I used to teach at, and we're going to go to this lady that has expertise in fixing these problems, and she's going to work with you. And after the first time through, the dog was doing much better. Jonah felt more confident with the dog because they got to do some things, and the dog seemed to be listening. And on the way home, I'm thinking, it's amazing because I know her and I knew what she was going to say, and all the advice that she gave was exactly what I had given to him. But it just didn't come from Dad. And all of a sudden on the way home, while I'm thinking of this, a voice comes from the back seat and it goes, Dad, that was amazing. The things that she said were just awesome. And were, they made so much sense. And I thought about it, and I could have gone one of two ways, and I'm glad I went the way I did. I could have just turned around and go, that's exactly what I told you. And all I said was, yep, she's really good at what she does. You're right.
One of the best days of being a parent.
That's a good story.
And, hearing Billy's story about him and his kids, I smile because, I know where he's coming from, and I can't wait until your kids are married with kids, because the day's going to come, Phil, when your kids come back with their kids, your grandkids, and say, you know what, Dad? You were right. I know Billy's been there.
I've never gotten that, no.
Okay.
Well, again, there's been, even recently, I've gone to my mom and said, I get it. I get it. And so I think Jonah doesn't have kids yet, so he might not. Yeah. It's coming, and just like, and I'm still learning things. And when I'm your age, then I'm going to go, oh, it clicks. Yeah. But again, I think it's important that the younger generation can see through the lenses of the older generation, or at least try to, and that the older generation can remember what it's like to be there. Because if both can do that, then everybody can get along. And isn't that interesting, though, how we can apply that to faith?
Yeah.
But that has happened in other aspects with my children. Both him and Tori have come and said, I really get what you were saying now. They've had experiences, like you said. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago, 13 years ago. Right. Same thing with our kids. Yeah. They have experiences and they grow as well. And as parents, we have to accept that. So
And one day they come back and say, "Yeah, Dad, hate to admit it, you were right."
Yeah. And what's interesting, and I know we're getting lengthy on this one, but what's interesting is there might be somebody that comes into your life where somebody else has tried to tell them about Jesus, and they just haven't been able to hear it.
Yeah.
But maybe we're the one, or maybe we're the one, they just can't hear it from us, and so they've got to find it through another avenue, let the Holy Spirit do its job. But it's interesting to think about that maybe there's somebody out there that we know that we go, oh, people have talked to them, they've just denied, but maybe we're that person that they can hear.
Kind of like all three of my kids are married. I didn't marry any of them.
Interesting.
Because I'm their dad,
Yeah.
not their pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So
Great questions, Anonymous.
Great questions. Yeah. Great questions, Mr. Anonymous and Mr. Billy.
It's been three questions with Pastor Carney.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time.
And by the way, we're going to email this segment to Jonah.
See you next time.
God bless you. Take care.
Thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions about Redeemer, have a topic or interview suggestion, or need to know anything about the church, you can contact the church office at churchoffice@redeemerwarsaw.org,
Pastor Carney at pastor_Carney@redeemerwarsaw.org,
Phil at phil.prevail@gmail.com, or Billy at rlc_it@redeemerwarsaw.org. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Please join us again next week. And until then, may the Lord be with your spirit and grace be with you.
Or as I like to say, anonymous.
So this isn't Pastor's question, right?
No. First question: who was the congregation member?
It was
Cut. Aloha.